Today's Palm Sunday reading comes from the Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas comes from a collection of writing known as the Gnostic Gospels. The Gnostic Gospels were discovered by a farmer in Nag Hammadi in rural Egypt in 1945. The 49 Gnostic Gospels were written by groups of Gnostic Christians living between the 1st and 2nd centuries BCE. AD. The Gnostic sects severely troubled other Christians, for it happily synchronized the beliefs of unorthodox Jews, the Greeks, and the Persians. This gospel is still thought to be heretical by many Christian church authorities. But we should remember that the 4 Gospels of the New Testament were themselves selected by church leaders many years after Jesus' death, and they chose them from a large number of similar Gospels in circulation during the 2nd century. So the Gospel of Thomas can claim to be an authentic Gospel written at the same time as the ones we know, but it was either rejected by the church or, more likely, kept secret by the Gnostic sect who owned it and who probably used it as the basis of their practice. Many of the sayings are familiar to us from the New Testaments, but they have been given a Gnostic sea change and read in a new and moving language. If they say to you, "Whence have you come?" say to them, "We come from the light, the place where the light came into existence through itself alone." If they say to you, "Who are you?" say, "We are his sons, and we are the elect of the living Father." If they ask you, "What is the sign of your Father who is within you?" say to them, "It is a movement, and it is a rest." At the Palm Sunday, Easter festival each year, Unitarian ministers like to explore a number of themes. Foremost amongst these is the humanity rather than the divinity of Jesus of Nazareth. We know very little of the life of Jesus of Nazareth. All that we can know with any factual or historical confidence, we know from the Roman historians Tacitus and Josephus. From them we know that he lived, he was tried, found guilty, and crucified by the Roman authorities of his time. Anything more in a factual sense we just do not have. The Gospels of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John are not eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life. They were written 70 to 90 years after the recorded death of Jesus. The stories of the Christian scriptures, the Gospels, and the letters of Paul were put together drawing upon the circulating oral storytelling tradition of that time. Travelling bards told stories of Jesus, and these invariably reached the authors of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. And biblical scholars tell us that there was an as yet unfound written document that they refer to as Q, that all the gospel writers would have had access to. As Unitarians, we usually stress at Easter and at other times that resurrection for us is not a literal event, but a mythological, symbolic representation that reminds us of how a new life can emerge even after a time of pain and suffering. As with the whole of the Bible itself, we view the resurrection stories not as literal recordings of what actually took place, but as symbolically rich in what they tell us about human life. We generally celebrate Easter as the return of spring and the renewal of life, and we remind each other that the early Christians gradually grafted the celebration of Easter onto already existing pagan spring festivals and the Jewish festival of Passover. We view the New Testament accounts of the resurrection as symbols of strength, power, and the renewal of life. And we reject the idea of physical resurrection. We do not believe that Jesus rose as a resuscitated, living, breathing corpse. We understand that for some of Jesus' followers, following his death, they felt a very strong presence and felt that he was among them in some kind of way, as he lives on as a strong presence in many people's lives today. At Easter especially, we stress that we Unitarians are more interested in the teachings of Jesus and the life he led, much more than we are about the details and circumstances of his birth and death. His messages of love, mercy, justice and forgiveness, and his ability, crucially I think, to make exceptions to the rule and welcome those who had been cast out by the rest of society, are far more important to us than whether he was conceived and born of a virgin and whether he rose to life after his death. Because we have long rejected the idea of original sin, the belief that Jesus atoned for the sins of the world by his death has very little relevance to us. We take the opportunity each Easter to remind each other of the political decisions which saw the formation of the Trinity, and deem that Christians would from then on understand Jesus as both human and divine, as Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. At the Council of Nicaea, the decision was made that the Athanasian understanding of Jesus as human and divine would be the official line of the Christian Church, while the Arian understanding of Jesus as robustly human would be deemed a heresy. We as Unitarians remind ourselves that the Trinity was a political, not a spiritual decision, and we as descendants of the Arians, evidenced by our name Unitarian, meaning one God, not three, wonder what the history of Christianity would have been like had the decision gone our way, so to speak. Throughout the year, but especially at Easter, we remind ourselves that Jesus is one of a number of especially gifted, insightful teachers who have graced the human stage. These leaders have emerged over the course of history to teach us how we should live and be at peace with ourselves and each other. Jesus, we remind ourselves, is not unique in this respect. There have been two, Moses, Muhammad, Gandhi, and Mother Teresa of Calcutta, and more. In word and practice, we as Unitarians generally are interested in the historical Jesus rather than the mythological Christ. And generally, I'm glad about this. I think it keeps us focused on the essence of what Jesus taught and what he would want us to take from his life and death. Yet sometimes, just sometimes, I wonder in our focus on the historical Jesus, in our rejection of the concept of the Christ, in our steady commitment to reason and intellectual rigour, that we lose something valuable. While I will be frankly bored to tears with a theological discussion over the virgin birth and the evidence for bodily resurrection, I have become quite interested in the ideas and writings of Matthew Fox and others who talk about their idea of there being a cosmic Christ who transcends denominations, religions, geography, and politics.